The movie kicks off with a bang as a woman pulls into a garage, only to be greeted by the enigmatic couple, John and Rosie. But things quickly take a thrilling turn when they uncover drugs and money stashed in the trunk of the woman's car. Using his desert-honed skills, John tends to the woman's bullet wound, while she soothes her child in the back seat. With a quick change of the license plate, John sends the woman on her way, leaving us hungry for answers about what's really going on. The next day, Rosie spies on their neighbor Troy through her trusty telescope, and suspicions arise. It seems like John and Rosie are keeping a close eye on their neighbors to protect their secretive business. Rosie's gut tells her that Troy might be up to something shady, but John brushes off her concerns, convinced that Troy is harmless due to his sharp aim and seemingly stable demeanor. As tensions rise, John and Rosie share a heart-to-heart, with Rosie expressing her frustration about their current situation. John tries to comfort her, revealing that they have a few more deliveries to make before he can confront his uncle, Neil, about leaving town for good. The plot thickens as we learn that John and Rosie are embroiled in Neil's operation, desperate to break free from his grip and start anew far from their hometown. As the day progresses, John heads to Neil's location, only to witness him berating a fresh recruit. The stakes are getting higher, and it's clear that John's path to freedom won't be easy. Neil shares with his nephew, John, the details of their latest delivery, worth a whopping $100,000. But before diving into business talk, Neil reminisces about how he took care of John after his father's death and even supported his time in the army. Now that John is back, he's fully committed to his uncle's operation, though he's counting down the days until he and his girlfriend can finally break free from this illegal lifestyle. As John leaves the restaurant with the fake license plates in hand, he runs into Troy's sons, and their unsettling behavior raises his suspicions. On his way home, John gets pulled over by Officer Burns, who's been hot on his trail, desperate to find evidence to bring down the illegal activities in town. However, despite her best efforts, she comes up empty-handed and lets John go. But John's attention is soon diverted when he notices a misplaced trash can near Troy's house. Unable to resist his instincts, he stops to put it back in its proper place, only to return home to receive today's delivery. Inside his garage, John meets with one of Neil's customers, and they carry out their illicit transaction. John makes sure to swap the customer's license plate before hitting the road once again, always staying one step ahead in this high-stakes game. As John carefully tallies up the cash he's stashed away from the day's earnings, he's already making plans to hand it over to Neil the following day. But Rosie, always the wild card, has a different idea. She suggests they make a run for it with Neil's money, a proposal John quickly shoots down, citing the age-old belief that greed is a harbinger of bad luck. Just when things couldn't get more complicated, Troy makes a surprise entrance, beer in hand. He politely inquires if John had been on his property earlier to retrieve a misplaced trash can. The conversation starts off innocently enough, until Troy suddenly shifts gears and starts making unwanted advances towards Rosie. His tight grip on her hand leaves them both uncomfortable, and Rosie promptly excuses herself, retreating back to bed. Troy then casually drops the bombshell that he has a telescope just like John's, but he uses it to spy on his neighbors. John's jaw nearly hits the floor in shock, until Troy cracks a smile and reveals he's just messing around. However, Troy's next revelation is far more unsettling. He's noticed a suspicious car with constantly changing license plates on a nearby road, insinuating that everyone has secrets. With that, Troy takes his leave as his sons are about to arrive. John wastes no time in getting rid of the beer Troy gave him, and he peers through his telescope at Troy's house with growing unease. Spotting Troy's sons, the same guys he had encountered at the restaurant earlier, sends a chill down John's spine. It's the final straw that pushes him to hastily gather his money and make urgent plans to leave the area come morning. As John gets ready to depart, he turns to Rosie and asks her if she's truly ready to leave her friends and family behind. Without missing a beat, Rosie affirms her unwavering commitment, boldly declaring that they have no real friends to begin with. With loose ends tied up, John sets out on his final cash delivery to Neil, his mind heavy with the weight of leaving it all behind. Meanwhile, Rosie is alone, eagerly counting the money they made from their risky, underground job, her imagination running wild with possibilities of what she could buy. But suddenly, a gunshot shatters the silence, and Rosie's instincts kick in. She grabs her trusty telescope and aims it towards Troy's house, her heart pounding. At first, she sees nothing amiss, but then her breath catches in her throat as she witnesses a horrifying scene that leaves her frozen with fear. Troy looks up and catches her spying, filling her with a sense of panic and uncertainty. On the other side of town, John arrives at Neil's place only to be ambushed by Neil's henchman. The henchman reveals that Neil knew of John's plans to leave and had issued a chilling threat to keep him from reconsidering. John's terror surges as he races back home, desperately trying to reach Rosie, but her phone remains unanswered. His frantic search of the house confirms his worst fear: Rosie is missing. Despite the money they made still being there, John's panic rises to a fever pitch. He is determined to find Rosie and follows a lead to Troy's land, hoping for answers. But what he learns from Troy shakes him to the core. Rosie may have left him for good. When John returns home, he continues his desperate search and his heart skips a beat as he spots Rosie's telescope, now in the living room and pointing towards Troy's house. The realization hits him like a ton of bricks: Rosie had been watching that direction before she vanished. Overwhelmed by a mix of emotions, John decides to take a moment to collect himself and seek solace with a drink at Troy's house, mirroring Troy's actions. However, what he finds there only deepens the mystery. Troy is nowhere to be found, and the unlocked door raises more questions than answers. As John continues his relentless search for Troy, he can't shake off the nagging feeling that he's being watched. His suspicions hit an all-time high when he spots a telescope pointed right at his own house. Realizing he's been under surveillance, he follows a faint melody that leads him to a concealed door in the bedroom, revealing a bone-chilling basement. The air is thick with tension as he steps further into the darkness, only to be met with a horrifying sight: the lifeless body of a teenage boy in one of the rooms. Shocked and disturbed, John's heart clenches with a mix of fear and determination. His instincts drive him to explore further, and in another room, he finds a young woman named Sarah trapped in a cage. Promising to help her find her friend Cole, who is also being held captive in the basement, John's resolve to uncover the truth grows stronger. But just as he's about to make his move to free Sarah, his heart sinks as he discovers Rosie in yet another cage, also a helpless prisoner. His mind races as he frantically searches for a way to unlock the cage and set her free, but his urgency is interrupted by the sound of Troy's impending return. Knowing he must confront Troy alone, John reluctantly leaves Rosie in the basement and arms himself with a knife, bracing for the imminent showdown. However, his plans are foiled when Troy's son, Cooper, and Harley unexpectedly arrive home. John is forced to hide in another room, eavesdropping on the family's conversation with bated breath. But what he hears next leaves him utterly stunned. Despite their gruesome crimes of kidnapping, Troy's son, Cooper, is revealed to be afraid of homicide and is suffering from trauma due to a recent attack on the young boy. Troy's reassurance to John that there won't be any unjust executions sends chills down John's spine. With a calculated risk, John descends into the basement ahead of Troy and his son, Cooper, to uncover their sinister activities. To his horror, John learns that Troy and Cooper are kidnappers who brutalize victims for ransom from wealthy parents. Troy, with his knowledge of the wealth of one of the captives, a young girl named Sarah, wears an eerie mask as he and Cooper bind her tightly to a chair, preparing to unleash unspeakable torment. Troy even records the vile scene, intending to use it as leverage for a ransom demand. As Troy and Cooper discuss their plan to dispose of a witness to their previous murders, Rosie, John's ears perk up. He overhears their conversation and realizes he must act fast. When they leave the basement, John wastes no time in rushing to Rosie, urging her to stay calm. He slips through a secret passage and hurries back to his house, grabbing a bolt cutter and a gun, arming himself for the dangerous task ahead. Returning to Troy's basement, John is met with a shocking sight: Troy and Cooper disposing of a body from their previous crime. Panic sets in as John frantically looks for an escape route, and that's when he spots a police car passing by. But things take a sinister turn as the car heads straight towards Troy, revealing that Officer Burns is in on it too. With adrenaline pumping, John tries to make a hasty retreat, but he runs into Cooper, and a fierce struggle ensues. In the chaos, both of them end up falling into a pit filled with dead rabbits, a grotesque reminder of Troy's sickening hunting habits. John, a man with a background in combat, is pushed to his limits as he takes drastic action to silence Cooper. He doesn't hesitate to forcefully stuff a dead rabbit into Cooper's mouth, silencing him forever. The realization of John's capabilities sinks in as he retraces his steps through the secret passage, only to find out that Rosie is no longer in the basement. The boys have taken her upstairs, but John doesn't lose hope. In the basement, John comes across Cole, a friend of Sarah's who is injured and unable to move. Without hesitation, John breaks the chain of Cole's cage and approaches Sarah, urging her to help him escort Cole out while he goes to rescue Rosie. Before leaving, John gives Sarah a clever plan: throw a stone at Troy's house after counting to 100, creating a diversion that may just give them the edge they need. Following John's lead, Sarah throws the stone as John makes his way towards Rosie. The commotion draws Troy and Harley away from Rosie, leaving her unguarded for a moment. John acts swiftly, rescuing Rosie and escaping from the basement. However, as Troy and Harley investigate the disturbance, they come across Cooper's lifeless body, and their grief turns into a seething desire for revenge against Cooper's killer. But when they return, Rosie is gone, and the family is determined to track down the perpetrator. As John, Sarah, Rosie, and Cole make a run for the truck, they run into Neil and his men, who are determined to stop John from leaving. The situation takes a sudden turn as Troy and Harley unleash a barrage of gunfire, claiming lives and leaving chaos in their wake. Despite the mayhem, the group manages to escape in Neil's car, with Troy and Harley hot on their heels. Luck seems to favor the villains as Neil is fatally shot, and Officer Burns steps in to intervene, further escalating the situation. The struggle intensifies as John, Sarah, and Rosie are taken back to the basement, marking the beginning of a harrowing ordeal. As Officer Burns tightens the ropes around John, Troy grabs Sarah, and Harley brutally attacks Rosie. It seems like all hope is lost. But Rosie, quick on her feet, seizes her chance and uses the handcuff keys to free herself, managing to restrain Harley in the process. Sarah also fights with all her strength and breaks free from her cuffs. Rosie then grabs the camera that was used to inflict pain and fights back with vengeance, using the camera stand to beat Harley to a pulp. With Harley defeated, Rosie wastes no time and rushes to save John. She grabs a tripod and goes after Officer Burns, determined to finish her off. Meanwhile, Sarah manages to grab a gun just as Troy enters the scene. Despite her uncertainty about how to use it, Troy swiftly snatches the weapon from her grip. Just when things seem dire, John and Rosie arrive just in the nick of time to rescue Sarah. But Troy is relentless. He plunges the house into darkness, extinguishing the lights and locking all the exits, staying one step ahead of them. With a calculated move, Troy uses gas shells to incapacitate their assailants, but he's not done yet. He emerges with his shotgun, fueled by determination to take them down. In the chaos, he orders the girls to go downstairs, and unleashes a hail of bullets at John, leaving him with no time to reach the girls. But John refuses to be a helpless victim any longer. With unwavering resolve, John takes matters into his own hands. He confronts Troy, gun to gun, ready to put an end to the nightmare once and for all. The room is charged with tension as John pulls the trigger, and the once threatening criminals now lay lifeless in a chilling silence. But the danger is not over yet. John and Rosie know they must cover their tracks. They take swift action, setting the bodies of the criminals ablaze, determined to erase any trace of their criminal past. With their hard-earned savings in hand, they vanish into the night, leaving behind their old life. Hours later, Sarah, who owes her life to John's bravery, faces questioning from the police about the harrowing events. The movie reaches its conclusion as John and Rosie embark on a new life in Mexico, far away from the shadows of their past and a nosy neighbor armed with a telescope. It's a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the haunting memories and build a brighter future together.